What would you do if the people who abandoned you came back for the only thing you love? That's not a rhetorical question. That's not a clever line to grab your attention. That is my life. And the reason I'm here telling you this story. For 20 years, my parents were like shadows erased from a wall. You know that feeling when you look at an old photo and see gaps where people used to stand? That was my family album. Empty spaces, missing voices. Birthdays with one candle and no song. I was 5 the day they left. Too young to understand abandonment, old enough to know absence. I remember sitting on the porch steps with my shoes untied, holding a stuffed rabbit that was missing one ear. My aunt walked up the gravel path, her face tight with worry. She crouched down and said, "Don't cry, baby, I've got you now." And she meant it. From that day on, my aunt became my parent, my shelter, my everything. She didn't just keep me alive, she taught me how to live. She gave me chores so I'd feel needed. She gave me stories so I'd feel loved. And most of all, she gave me the farm. The farm was more than dirt and fences. It was a beating heart. The soil smelled like sun-warmed bread. The cattle moved slow and stubborn, like they knew this place would outlast us all. Every sunrise was a reminder, life begins again, even after the longest night. That land wasn't just property, it was proof that love could take root where pain once lived. So, imagine my shock when one evening, 20 years later, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't a polite knock, not hesitant, not the kind that says, "Sorry to bother you." No, it was sharp, heavy, like the sound of someone who believes they still belong here. I opened it, and there they were, my parents. Do you know what it's like to face ghosts? You freeze. Part of you aches to run into their arms, and another part wants to slam the door. My body did both at once. My hand tightened on the knob so hard my knuckles turned white. My breath caught in my chest. My father looked older, heavier in the face. His hair was thinner, but his shoulders still carried that forced authority. My mother's eyes were the same green as mine, but colder. The kind of cold that comes from years of calculation. "Hi, Elena," she said, like she'd just been gone an afternoon. Like she'd been picking up groceries, like 20 years of silence could be brushed away with 2 words. And then came the sentence that made me realize why they were really there. "We need to talk about the farm. Not me, not my life, not the years they missed. The farm." I felt the air thicken. My ears rang so loud I could barely hear the rest. Something about my brother, something about debts, something about needing to sell, as if it were theirs, as if I hadn't spent every morning since childhood tending this land, as if the soil hadn't soaked up my sweat, my laughter, my tears. I stared at them, waiting, hoping. Maybe this was some twisted way to start apologizing. Maybe this was just the opening line before the real words. "We're sorry. We regret leaving you. We want to make things right." But those words never came. Instead, my father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low like a business deal. "We just need you to consider it. It's for family. Your brother's future is at stake." Family, the word burned. The irony was so thick it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. They had abandoned me, left me to grow up without them, and now they wanted to wave the word family like a magic key. Have you ever been in a moment where the room feels too small for your anger? My kitchen suddenly felt like a trap. The walls were closing in. Their coffee cups clinked on the table my aunt and I had sanded with our hands. Their voices filled the air that had never needed them. And all I could think was, ghosts don't get to come back and claim the living. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping the wood floor. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but sharp. "This isn't yours, not anymore." My mother blinked, like she couldn't process defiance. My father shifted uncomfortably, as if the balance of power had tilted without him noticing. I excused myself and stepped outside. The dusk wrapped around me, heavy, sticky, familiar. The crickets screamed into the night like they always had. The smell of cut grass and diesel from the tractor grounded me, reminded me where I belonged. I looked up at the sky, dark blue streaked with the last gold of sunset. My aunt used to say, "Look up, Elena. No matter how heavy the day gets, the sky is always wider." I whispered to her memory. "They came back, Auntie. They came back for the land." And I swear, in the silence that followed, I could almost hear her voice. "Then stand tall, girl. This soil has more backbone than they ever did." That night, I sat on the porch long after they left. The ghosts had returned, but they weren't here for me. They wanted the only thing I had left of her, the only thing that had stayed, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because when you tell ghosts no, they don't vanish, they fight. So let me ask you again, what would you do if the people who abandoned you came back for the only thing you love? Sometimes when ghosts knock on your door, the only way to keep standing is to turn backward, to the roots that held you when no one else did. I didn't sleep that night after they came. My chest felt like it was carrying stones. Every creak of the farmhouse echoed too loud, like the house itself remembered what it was like when they left. So I pulled out an old wooden box from under my bed. Inside was a notebook, leather cracked at the corners, my aunt's handwriting looping across the first page. "These are the days we grew, Elena. Don't forget them." I flipped it open, and just like that, I was 10 years old again. Flashback. It was summer, and the Texas heat stuck to my skin like glue. My aunt was bent over the garden bed, sweat running down her temple, her straw hat tilted too far forward. She handed me a packet of seeds. Tiny, fragile things resting in my palm. "Go on," she said. "Put them in. Gentle, like you're tucking a baby into bed." I knelt down and pressed the seeds into the earth, my little fingers clumsy but careful. I remember the dirt smelled rich, almost sweet, like coffee grounds after rain. I remember looking up at her and asking, "Will they really grow?" She wiped her hands on her apron and crouched beside me. "Yes, but only if we stay. Only if we water, weed, and wait." She smiled, soft but firm. "Things grow when you stay." That sentence carved itself into me, because she wasn't just talking about vegetables. She was talking about me, about the fact that she stayed when they didn't. The farm became more than home. It became a mirror. Every fence post we hammered, every calf we nursed back to health, it was proof that you could build family out of effort, not blood. Do you know what that feels like? To find safety not in who you were born to, but in who chose you? It's like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I kept turning the notebook pages. Winter, age 12. There's a scribble. Elena baked her first pie. Too much salt, but she laughed so hard she forgot the taste. I see myself in the kitchen, flour streaking my cheek, my aunt pretending it was the best thing she ever ate. That kitchen was never silent. It was music. Pots clanging, country radio buzzing, her humming low and steady. It was nothing like the house I lived in before. That house had silence so sharp it cut spring, age 15. Elena learned to drive the tractor today, crooked rows, but she didn't give up. I can still feel the steering wheel vibrating in my hands, the engine louder than my heartbeat. My aunt standing at the edge of the field, waving her arm in big circles, cheering me on. Nobody had ever cheered for me before her. And then, the page that always gets me, 17 years old. The day she got sick. Her handwriting grew shaky. "No matter what happens, this land is yours. Promise me, Elena. Stay with it. It will stay with you." My throat tightened as I read those words again. She was the only parent I ever knew, And she trusted me with more than soil. She trusted me with legacy. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest. Out the window, the moonlight hit the barn roof, silver and sharp. The field stretched wide and endless, waiting for morning. This was my inheritance, not from the people who abandoned me, but from the woman who saved me. And that's why their return cut so deep, because when they asked me to sell, they weren't just asking me to give up land. They were asking me to erase her, to uproot everything she planted in me. Tell me, could you do that? Could you sell the only place that ever made you feel loved? That night, I whispered my answer into the dark. No. I didn't know how ugly things would get. I didn't know about the courtroom battles or the betrayal waiting in old papers. But I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. I wasn't letting go. Because the seeds of the past weren't just crops in the field. They were me. And I had grown roots too deep to be pulled out. There's a certain kind of silence that only exists when strangers sit at a table pretending to be family. The clink of silverware, the scrape of a chair leg, the soft hum of a ceiling fan. It all sounded louder that night, because no one was saying what we were really there to say. I sat at the far end of the dining table, the same table where my aunt used to place Sunday roasts, where laughter spilled like sweet tea over ice. But now, my parents sat across from me, hands folded too neatly, eyes darting around the room like they didn't quite belong here, because they didn't. Not anymore. The meal was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad straight from the garden. Food I cooked, food they hadn't earned. Every bite I chewed felt heavy, like I was forcing myself to swallow stones. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "Elena," she said softly, almost rehearsed. We owe you an apology." Her words hung in the air, sticky and strange. My father nodded, eyes cast down. "We weren't there for you when you needed us. We know that." And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something stir in me. Relief? Hope? Have you ever wanted so badly to believe someone had changed that you almost let yourself forget the scars they left behind? That was me, sitting there, staring at the two people who disappeared for 20 years, telling me they were sorry. But then came the turn. The shift in tone was subtle, but I felt it in my bones. My mother's voice dropped into something firmer, less fragile. "We didn't come just to apologize. We came because we need your help." The word help tasted bitter before it even hit the air. My father cleared his throat. "Your brother is in trouble, financial trouble. He needs a way out. The farm, it could solve everything if you sold it." There it was, the ask. Do you know that feeling when your chest tightens, like all the air in the room has been vacuumed out? I stared at them, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. They wanted me to erase 20 years of work, 20 years of survival, because my brother couldn't keep his own life straight? I put the fork down slowly, my hand trembling. "This farm isn't just dirt and wood," I said. My voice was low, almost a whisper, but steady. "It's my life. It's hers." I didn't have to say my aunt's name. Her presence was there in every corner of that room. My mother leaned in, her eyes sharp now. "Elena, you don't understand. This is about family. We're trying to save him, family." The word struck me like a slap. Where was that word when I was 12, watching other kids with parents in the stands while mine were nowhere to be found? Where was it when I was 17, holding my aunt's hand in a hospital room, praying she wouldn't leave me alone in the world? I wanted to laugh. Instead, I felt my jaw tighten. "You talk about family now, after 20 years? The silence that followed was thick. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate. And then, the mood shifted again. My father leaned forward, his tone darker. "Don't be selfish, Elena. This farm could mean everything for your brother. You owe us that much. Owe. That word burned. I felt my chest rise and fall faster, my pulse in my ears. Owe them? Owe the people who abandoned me? Owe the people who only remembered I existed when they needed something? The room tilted. The roast chicken smelled suddenly sour, the mashed potatoes cold. I wanted to stand up to walk away, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. Here's the thing. You can forgive, or at least try. But when the apology is just a prelude to a demand, the wound tears open again, deeper than before. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking under the table, but my voice didn't falter. I don't owe you anything. The music in my head changed right then. I swear I could almost hear it. That shift, that drop. The warmth of their sorry evaporated, replaced by the chill of expectation, of manipulation. And in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't about saving my brother. It wasn't even about money. It was about control. They wanted the last piece of me they hadn't already taken. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping hard against the floor. Dinner's over. Their faces tightened, shock and anger colliding, but I didn't wait for their response. I walked out, the sound of my own footsteps loud against the wooden floor, the ghost of my aunt's voice in my head. Things grow when you stay, and I had stayed, which meant this land was mine, not theirs, not ever again. But here's the truth. I didn't know then how far they'd go. I didn't know this dinner was just the opening move in a war I never asked for. I didn't sleep that night. The words from the dinner table kept circling my head like vultures. You owe us. This is about family. Don't be selfish. I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my room, tracing the faint lines of paint that had peeled over the years. That ceiling had seen me cry as a child, whispered dreams to myself as a teenager, and now it was watching me fight the weight of a choice that would shape everything. Do you know what it feels like when every memory inside you rises up to protest? Like your whole body becomes a courtroom and your heart is the judge? That was me, alone in the dark, weighing what they said against everything I knew to be true. I got up before the sun. The air was still damp with night, cool against my skin. I slipped on boots and walked out into the fields. The ground was soft, dew clinging to the grass. The earth smelled rich, alive. It greeted me like it always did, steady, patient, waiting. This farm wasn't just land. It was my inheritance in the truest sense, not because of blood, but because of love. Every furrow of soil had my aunt's hands in it. Every fence post held the echo of her voice, teaching me how to mend, how to build, how to stand firm. I stood in the middle of the field, looked out at the horizon slowly burning gold, and I whispered, I'm not giving this up. That whisper became a vow. Later that morning, I pulled out the folder I had kept hidden in my desk drawer. Inside were the papers for the Green Fund, the partnership my aunt and I used to dream about. She always believed this land could be more than survival. It could be a future. Sustainable farming, community workshops, a place where kids from the city could learn that food doesn't just appear on a store shelf. I ran my fingers over the application, already filled out, already waiting. My aunt's words echoed in my head. Things grow when you stay. And for once, I realized staying didn't just mean holding on. It meant planting something new. I dialed the number. My hands were sweaty, my heart pounding. When the representative from the Green Fund answered, I cleared my throat. This is Elena Ramirez. I'm ready to sign. The voice on the other end was cheerful, professional. We're glad to hear that. You know this will be a long commitment, right? Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. I know exactly what I'm committing to. We set a meeting for later that week. I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand. That was it. That was the moment. The choice was made. But with every choice comes a ripple, doesn't it? You think you're just making one decision, and suddenly you've set off a chain reaction. I could already hear my parents' voices in my head, their disappointment turning sharp, their anger inevitable. Did that scare me? Absolutely. But fear wasn't enough to uproot me anymore. When the day of the signing came, I drove into town with the folder tucked under my arm. The Green Fund office smelled of coffee and fresh paint, papers rustling as people moved around. I sat across from the lawyer, pen in hand. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like the weight of history was inside it. My aunt's hands on mine when I was 8, guiding me through the first time I planted a row of beans. My 17-year-old self standing in the hospital, promising her I'd keep this land alive. My 28-year-old self staring down the ghosts of abandonment and saying, "No more," I signed. Do you know that sound, the scratch of ink on paper, that suddenly feels louder than everything else in the room? That was the sound of me reclaiming my life. I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years. The sky outside was wide and blue, the kind of blue that makes you believe in beginnings. But here's the thing. Decisions don't just change you. They challenge everything around you. And the moment I signed that paper, I knew. I knew my parents wouldn't let it go, because if I chose roots, they would choose war. I drove back home, the folder now heavier with the final contract. I placed it on the kitchen table, the same table where they had once asked me to sell everything. This time the table held my answer. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down, and let the silence of the house wrap around me. I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. And maybe this is the part you need to hear most. Boundaries aren't walls. They're roots. They don't push people out. They hold you steady when the storm comes. That night I walked the fields again. The stars were scattered bright across the sky. The earth was cool beneath my boots. I felt the contract in my pocket, like a promise pressed against my heart. I whispered to the land, to her, to myself. We're staying. We're growing. No one takes this from us. But what I didn't know then was that the very next move they made would change the game completely. The letter came on a Tuesday. I still remember the sound of it sliding through the slot in my front door. Just a soft thunk on the wooden floor, harmless, ordinary. I picked it up like it was just another bill, another flyer. But when I saw the return address, District Court of Hidalgo County, my chest froze. I tore it open right there, standing barefoot in the hallway, and the words hit harder than anything I'd ever read. Plaintiffs, Rafael and Maria Ramirez. Defendants, Elena Ramirez, my parents, suing me for the farm. Do you know what it feels like when your stomach just drops? Like the ground you thought was solid suddenly disappears? That was me, gripping the letter, the edges cutting into my fingers. I sank to the floor. My dog, Daisy, patted over and rested her head on my knee, like she knew. My aunt wasn't here anymore to tell me how to fight. And now, it wasn't just about guilt trips over dinner. It was war. I thought about throwing up. Instead, I laughed. A sharp, broken laugh that didn't sound like me. Of course, I whispered to the empty room. Of course they would do this. The days after blurred together. The story hit the local news within a week. Family feud over land in Hidalgo County. Parents claim daughter refuses to share inheritance. Tragic rift in Ramirez family. The headlines didn't tell the truth. They didn't mention the abandonment. They didn't mention the years my aunt scraped and saved to keep this place alive while my parents disappeared. All they saw was blood. Blood makes for better TV. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from neighbors. I saw the news, Elena. Messages from strangers. How could you do this to your family? Even in the grocery store, I felt the stares. 2 women whispering by the oranges. A man shaking his head when I passed by. My family name dragged through mud. One morning, a reporter actually showed up at my gate. She leaned over the fence, microphone in hand, camera pointed at my face. Elena, Do you have a comment on the lawsuit? Do you regret refusing your parents? I shut the gate so hard the latch rattled. Do I regret not giving up my life's work to people who walked away from me? No, I don't. That clip never made it to air. Too messy, too real. But the whispers grew louder, the pressure heavier. Even the Green Fund, the very people who had just signed on to back my dream, called me into a meeting. The room smelled like fresh paint and tension. One of the board members, a man in a crisp gray suit, slid the newspaper across the table. This kind of publicity, it's risky for us. We can't afford to be associated with a scandal. I wanted to scream. Instead, I steadied my voice. This isn't a scandal, it's my life, it's my land. And I'm not backing down. He raised an eyebrow. But are you prepared to fight them? Legally? Publicly? Prepared? Number determined? Absolutely. That night, I sat on the porch with my aunt's old journal in my lap. The cicadas hummed in the trees. I flipped to a page I'd read 100 times. Elena has roots here, stronger than mine. Stronger than anyone's. She won't be moved. Her faith wrapped around me like armor, and yet I couldn't shake the fear. Because lawsuits aren't just paper. They bleed you, they strip you. And my parents knew exactly how to hit me where it hurt. Do you know what's worse than betrayal? Seeing strangers debate your worth like you're a headline, like your pain is entertainment. But here's the part I need you to hear. When they came at me with lawyers and cameras, they forgot one thing. I wasn't that abandoned little girl anymore. I had survived worse than whispers. I called my lawyer the next morning. Her name was Clara. Steady voice, sharp eyes. "We're going to fight this," she said. No hesitation. But you need to be ready. They're not just going after the land. They're going after your story. And she was right. Because in the weeks that followed, every family friend, every old connection, every dusty memory was dragged out into the light. My parents painted themselves as the victims. They said I had turned cold, that I had forgotten what loyalty meant. But you can't forget something you never had. One night, scrolling through social media, I saw a post that stopped me cold. A blurry photo of me at the farmer's market, head down, carrying bags of vegetables. The caption, "Hard to believe she's fighting her own parents. All over money, money." That's what they thought this was. Not roots, not promises, not the woman who raised me with cracked hands and sleepless nights. That's when the anger really set in. It burned away the fear. It reminded me why I couldn't fold. Because this wasn't just about me. It was about truth. About drawing a line that said, you can't rewrite history just because you don't like how it makes you look. The lawsuit was their weapon. But my weapon was the one thing they underestimated. My resolve. And maybe yours too. Because I know some of you watching this, you've been here in your own way. Maybe not in court, but in your living room. Maybe not in headlines, but in whispers. When people who hurt you try to play the victim. When the world sides with them because it's easier than facing the truth. If you've ever been there, you know. The pressure, the shame, the rage. And here's the truth. That lawsuit, it wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the start of a battle that would tear everything open. Because paper has power. Headlines have power, but roots? Roots outlast storms. Stay with me, because what they tried next, what they pulled out of their sleeves, made the lawsuit look like child's play. And it almost broke me. The envelope looked ordinary, beige, creased at the corners like someone had thumbed it too many times. I found it waiting on the porch swing when I came back from the field, dust on my shins, fingers smelling like tomato vines. There was no return address, just my name in a handwriting that tried too hard to look careful. I didn't open it right away. You ever feel your body knows something before your brain does? Like a dog bristling before a storm. The cicadas were loud. The sun was slipping behind the pecan trees. I stood there, heartbeat in my throat, and I knew whatever sat inside that envelope wasn't just paper, it was a blade. I took it into the kitchen. Daisy followed, nails clicking on tile. I poured water, Didn't drink it. I slit the top with my aunt's old paring knife and slid the contents onto the table. A contract. Old paper, yellowed but not fragile. A photocopy of a photocopy of a what? The title at the top was bold, official. Transfer of development rights. My name printed beneath. Their names above it, a signature line, my signature, my signature. My first thought was ridiculous, petty. I never curl the tail on the A like that. The E was close, though, rounded, a little sloppy. My stomach clenched as a memory skittered across my mind like a mouse. Me at 16, signing a field trip form in the kitchen. My aunt teasing me, "Make it pretty, mija." I made it pretty after that. But this wasn't pretty. This was practiced. For a second, I honestly forgot to breathe. Then the nausea hit. I grabbed the edge of the counter, Daisy whined. You know that cold wash you get when you're blindsided? When your skin turns into someone else's? I felt it crawling up my arms. I flipped to the second page, the date, the notary stamp. The little inked rectangle declaring truth. I didn't sign this. I didn't. The same line ran laps in my skull until the letters lost meaning. I tried to hear my aunt's voice, to steady myself with her calm. All I got was the hum of the fridge and 2 flies tapping at the window. I called Clara. She answered on the second ring. You okay? No, I said. They sent something, a contract. I told her what I saw. She went quiet in that way she does when her brain is moving fast. Don't touch it more than you have to. Put it back in the envelope. Bring it to my office in the morning, eh? Clara, I whispered and felt pathetic. It has my name. Then we'll prove it doesn't have your hand. We didn't sleep much that night, Daisy and I. I lay on the couch with the envelope under a cookbook like that could weigh it down, keep it from floating off and changing the shape of my life. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every wind-swept branch like knocking. I sat up around 3:14 and wrote my name over and over on a yellow legal pad until my wrist cramped. The difference between letters can be tiny and still mean everything. Morning turned the world ordinary again, dew on the pasture, a hawk looping lazy circles. I carried the envelope like some kind of sacred evil and drove to Clara's office. The door smelled like coffee and printer ink. She wore a navy dress and her hair up. She didn't look alarmed. That helped. We spread the pages on her conference table. They're alleging you signed away the right to keep the farm under conservation, she summarized. That you agreed, years ago, to transfer development rights to them when certain conditions were met. What conditions? Your aunt's passing. The room tilted. I sat down hard. The chair squeaked. That's not real. I know. Her voice was steady. But it has a notary seal, and it's dated 5 years back. And it's just enough to spook the Green Fund. The Green Fund. I could almost feel their eyes on me. Measured, corporate, risk-averse. I pictured that boardroom with its fern in the corner and the nervous tapping of pens. Panic fizzed in my chest. The deal I'd fought for, the dream I'd pinned to the fence posts like prayer flags. Paper could shred it. Clara called a document examiner. She must have had him on speed dial because he waltzed in by lunch with a briefcase and half-moon glasses. His name was Wilkes. He shook my hand and looked at me like he was reading the margins of my face. You're Elena, he said, polite but clinical. Can you write your name for me a few times? He slid paper across the table, I wrote. He nodded, humming. He held the contract up to the window, backlit the fibers, sniffed the ink like a sommelier. He made soft little grunts. This is interesting. Interesting, I repeated, united in hatred for that non-word. He pointed to the signature. Pen pressure here is inconsistent with the rest of the document. The ink is a different compound from the body text. And see this tremor on the "en"? That can be a sign of simulation. Someone copying a style they only halfway know. My lungs loosened slightly. So it's fake? He didn't smile. I never say fake on day one. I say anomalous. I'd like originals, not scans. And the notary's log? Clara nodded. We'll subpoena. I wanted to hug him for not being optimistic. Optimism is a luxury. What I needed was method. By afternoon, the Green Fund requested an emergency meeting. I took the elevator up to their floor and counted the breaths in my chest like beads. In the glass-walled conference room, the city spread below like a mosaic. The board members sat in their neutral suits, neutral faces. Ms. Hart, the director, folded her hands in front of her like a calm judge. We received a copy of a contract, she said. No preamble. If it holds up, it changes our risk profile. It won't hold up, I said. I didn't sign it. A man to her right, gray hair, meticulous tie, tilted his head. You understand, Ms. Ramirez, our concern is due diligence. Sometimes what we believe emotionally doesn't align with the legal record emotionally. Like I was a storm and they were just trying to stay dry. Clara sat beside me, legs crossed at the ankle, voice professional steel. We have a forensic examiner finding inconsistencies. We also have a clear timeline of Ms. Ramirez's activities 5 years ago. We will contest authenticity. We ask that the fund not take premature action based on a document whose provenance is, at best, murky. Ms. Hart was polite, which is not the same thing as kind. We're not withdrawing, but we are pausing disbursements and public announcements until clarity is restored. The word pausing felt like a gate slamming. I said thank you anyway. Sometimes dignity is the only thing you can control. On the way out, in the elevator glare, I saw my reflection. Jaw tight, freckles stark, eyes more tired than I remembered. I asked myself the question that had been tapping at my ribs all day. Why now? Why this? Because a lawsuit is one thing. A forged contract is a story. A better story, if you're my parents. It rewrites me as the liar. It makes me the one who changed, betrayed, reneged. It makes me the villain of a tale I never asked to be in. Clara squeezed my shoulder. We'll fight the paper with better paper, better paper. It sounded ridiculous and exactly right. Back home, the farm was beautiful in that insulting way. How can anything be beautiful when your life is coming apart? The wind moved the grass in long strokes. The pump clicked. Daisy chased a dragonfly and lost. I stood in the driveway and felt a weight settle in the back of my mouth. I was so tired. You know the tired that sits behind your tongue, where crying would start if you let it? In the kitchen, I dropped my bag on the counter and opened the drawer where my aunt kept rubber bands and twist ties and old recipes written on napkins. At the bottom, wrapped in a grocery sack, was the thing I'd been avoiding since she died. Her important papers folder. I didn't pull it out. Not yet. Sometimes you don't open the thing because once you open the thing, you have to keep going. And right then I wanted 5 minutes where time didn't move forward. I made tea. I watched the kettle steam like an old movie. I sat at the table with the envelope and the legal pad where I'd written my name in choked loops. Daisy put her chin on my thigh and sighed as if to say, I'm here. The next morning, Clara called with that clipped tone that means there's news. Opposing counsel filed a motion to admit the contract into the case record immediately, she said. And, Elena, listen. They attached a sworn statement from your parents. I braced, what does it say? That your aunt asked them to hold the contract privately to avoid family drama while she was ill. That you signed it willingly at a notary in town. I laughed. It came out jagged. Name the notary. Patel, on Westmont. We checked. Mr. Patel sold the business 3 years ago and moved to Dallas. Of course he did. The universe loves a vanishing witness, Clara, I said. What if I lose everything? There was a pause on the line, a soft thrum of the city behind her. Then you'll still be you, she answered. But I don't plan on letting that happen. I wanted to borrow her certainty like a jacket. It didn't quite fit. We went to see the new owner of Patel's old shop. The bell over the door chimed. The air smelled like toner. The man behind the counter wore a name tag that said Luis. He dug into a shelf for old ledgers, even though he didn't owe us anything. Dust bloomed when he set them down. We flipped pages. Names, dates, signatures like rows of swimming fish. I read until the numbers blurred. No Elena Ramirez on the day in question. No aunt. No parents. Nothing. But absence isn't proof. It's air. And air doesn't argue back in court. When we stepped outside, the heat walloped me. I leaned against the brick and closed my eyes. Something inside me did a delicate, quiet cracking. "You holding up?" Clara asked. "Define holding." She nodded like that counted as an answer. "We'll bring Wilkes formally onto the case, and we'll request chain of custody documents for the original contract. Whoever handled it, copiers, couriers, the notary, someone will hiccup. Paper trails hate liars." I wanted to believe that. I did. But also, I wanted my aunt. I wanted her kitchen with the lemon oil and the radio playing rancheras too loud. I wanted to ask her, what do I do when the people who left me come back as thieves? I wanted her to say, you plant your feet and you don't move. That evening, I finally pulled the important papers folder from the drawer. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, tax receipts, the deed, a photo of me and my aunt planting trees in the back field. My braids were crooked. She was laughing. It punched the breath out of me. At the bottom, a letter from the first bank that ever lent her money. And tucked with it, a pamphlet from a free legal clinic with her notes in the margins. Ask about co-ownership. Ask about wills. Ask about development rights. 3 question marks. She'd never been careless. She was precise. She would not have let me sign something blind, something that cut the legs out from under the future we talked about over beans and tortillas and every dusk we ever watched together. Daisy nudged my arm with her nose. I wiped my face. "Okay," I told the folder, the kitchen, the night. "Okay." Days became lists, calls, emails. Wilkes sent his preliminary memo, tactful, firm, full of words like incompatible and uncharacteristic. Clara drafted responses. I watered the fields and tried to keep the drip lines from clogging. The sun kept rising, a little rude in its consistency. My parents did not call. They didn't have to. Their voices lived inside the affidavit, clean and legal and colder than anything they'd ever said to my face. The Green Fund asked for an update every other day, and every other day I told them the same thing. "We're working." I could hear the carefulness in their replies. "We respect your process. We need to safeguard our mission." Language that meant, "You are a risk we didn't budget for." One night, I rehearsed what I'd say to my parents if I could still say anything. I would tell them, "You cannot wash your hands in holy water after you set the church on fire. You cannot steal my story by drafting it on nice letterhead." Another night, I rehearsed what I'd say to the notary if we ever found him. "Look at me. Look at my hands. Did these hands sign that paper? Or do you just remember a fee and a stamp and a promise to be careful?" And then there were the hours where I said nothing, because saying nothing was the only way to keep from screaming. The hearing to consider the contract's admissibility was set for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks is a long time to not breathe. I cooked big batches of food and gave most of it away. I repaired a fence post I'd been ignoring for months. I found a pair of earrings my aunt had lost behind the dresser and wore them under my flannel like a spell. 3 days before the hearing, I got a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. The voice was shaky, older. This is Mr. Patel," it said. "I heard you were looking for me." For a full minute, I stood in the driveway staring at my phone like it might sprout wings. I didn't call back, not yet. I let the hope sit in my mouth and dissolve a little so it wouldn't cut me when I swallowed. Because hope is sharp when you've been starved of it. That night I sat on the porch steps, Daisy pressed against my side and watched the sky come apart in purples. I told the open air, if the truth matters, let it matter now. The wind carried the words into the trees. Maybe they stuck like seeds. Maybe they blew away. Here's the thing I have to say, even if it makes me sound weak. The betrayal didn't only live in the paper. It lived in the way the paper made other people look at me. Suspicion has a smell. It's like rain in a hot parking lot. You know it instantly. You can't convince the air it's wrong. I went to bed early and woke at 2:07 with the same thought I started with. I didn't sign it. I whispered it into the dark until I fell asleep again. The repetition didn't convince anyone but me. Maybe I was the only one I needed to convince for now. If you've been here, if someone you love has tried to weaponize the past, I want you to know the sensation has edges. You can map them. You can learn where they cut and where they just bruise. You can learn to carry your story in a way that no counterfeit can replace. The morning of the pre-hearing meeting, Clara texted, "Bring a copy of your aunt's notes." I tucked them into a folder, kissed Daisy's head, and locked the door. As I stepped down the porch, I felt the ground steady under me. Not because anything was solved, but because I'd named it paper betrayal. That's what this was, and paper can tear. We drove to the courthouse. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and nerves. People sat on benches, gripping their lives in manila folders. I recognized the back of my mother's head before I knew what I was looking at. Her hair was pinned up. My father stood next to her in a suit that didn't fit, talking to a man with a briefcase. For a heartbeat, all the fight drained out of me, and I was just a girl again, standing on a step stool while my aunt tied my apron. My mother turned. Our eyes caught. Hers were dry, mine weren't. She gave me the smallest nod, like we were strangers who once shared an elevator and now shared a coincidence. Clara's hand warmed the small of my back. "Look at me," she said quietly. I did. Her eyes were sharp. "We go in. We keep this about the document, not about what they did. Not yet." I nodded. The word "yet" clanged like a church bell. The door opened. A clerk called our names. We filed into a room that looked exactly like every courtroom in every show you've ever seen, except it's colder and brighter and your throat is a desert. The judge took his seat. Papers shuffled, shoes squeaked. A cough ricocheted. Opposing counsel rose. He wore a smile like a clean knife. "Your Honor, as per our motion, we submit this contract, lawful, notarized, dated, as evidence that Ms. Ramirez consented." And that's when my vision narrowed. The edges of the room blurred. The only thing in focus was the page he lifted with 2 fingers, the signature at the bottom, the way the ink bled a little where the pen had pressed too hard, like someone trying to push their way into my life through a needle. My breath hitched. My heart was a trapped bird. I could hear nothing and everything. Zoom in. On the curl of the A, on the tremor, on the little skip where the writer hesitated because they knew me, but not enough. My hands balled into fists against my skirt. I bent my head and whispered, too soft for anyone but me to hear. "Not mine." Clara stood. Her voice rang clear. "Your Honor, we object to immediate admission. Our expert has identified multiple anomalies. We request time to obtain originals, to subpoena the notary's logs, and to conduct a proper analysis." The judge looked over his glasses. "You'll have it," I exhaled. It sounded like a sob swallowed at the last second. My mother watched me. My father looked at his shoes. The paper lay between us like a dropped weapon neither side dared to pick up. When we stepped back into the hall, Clara leaned in, lowered her voice so it held only me. "Stay with me," she said. "This is the ugly middle. It will get uglier before it gets clean. Ugly middle. That's a name for something I'd never been able to name." We rode the elevator down in silence. The metal doors reflected our tired faces back at us. When they opened, the day outside was bright and indecently alive. A woman laughed into her phone on the sidewalk. A kid skateboarded past the steps and whooped when he landed his trick. In the quiet between us, a thought arrived like a note slid under a door. I am not alone. It didn't change anything, but it made everything bearable for the time it took to cross the street. And if you're still here, listening to this messy, unglamorous part of the story, stay. Because what came next flipped everything. I didn't wait for the sun. I woke up to that thin gray hour when the house is still a held breath, and I went straight to the kitchen table with coffee and a box of folders that smelled like dust and lemon oil. Daisy thunked her tail against my chair and then curled up like a cinnamon roll at my feet. I opened my laptop, hit the power, and watched the screen bloom from black to that hopeful little glow. Clack. Clack, clack, clack. If you were here, you'd hear it. The keyboard, the search bar swallowing my name, the years, the words agreement, transfer, notary, Patel, Westmont. Emails are fossils. They hold on to everything you thought was small until it's not. I started with the obvious: inbox, sent mail, archived. I typed my aunt's name and felt her walk into the room. Subject lines: fence posts delivery Thursday. Do you want more jalapeno seeds? Insurance question. Nothing with development rights. Nothing with the sharp angles of legal language. That should have calmed me. It didn't. The absence felt like a laugh in the wrong place. So I did the thing you do when you're desperate. I opened search filters like a surgeon laying out clean tools. Date range: 5 years ago. Attachments: yes. Words to include: deed, conservation, fund. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Hits poured in like rain. PDF invoices from the seed co-op, scanned receipts from the tractor repair shop, a photo of my aunt in the feed store hat aisle, grinning under a ridiculous straw sombrero. I clicked, skimmed, saved. I built a pile. The kettle screamed on the stove. I turned it off and forgot to pour. You know how certain days make a groove in your memory? The day they say I signed that paper was one of those grooves. I pulled up my calendar. I don't schedule much, but my aunt did. Her entries were still shared to my account from the time she beat me at every adulting chore. Little rectangles spoke from the past. 8 a.m., drip line clean. 10 a.m., county extension call. 2 p.m., pick up seed potatoes. 5 p.m., watch sunset. Bring blanket. That last one made my throat go tight. No notary, no Patel. Nothing with Westmont except pickup mower belt. Okay, I whispered to Daisy, to the table, to the morning that had arrived without me noticing. Okay. Clack, clack, clack. I went deeper. Cloud backups, Google Drive, the old scans folder my aunt named with 2 exclamation marks like a joke. Inside, a woman's whole life flattened into pixels. Driver's license renewals, a warranty from a toaster she loved like a pet, the deed to the farm with a coffee ring stain in the corner. I clicked until my eyes watered. Buried halfway down was a file named Notary, Docs. My breath paused. I opened it. It wasn't a contract. It was a list. My aunt's list, titled in bold, messy font. Questions for notary plus lawyer. Bullet points beneath. If I get sick, how do we make sure Elena knows everything? Co-ownership versus transfer? No development. How to protect? Witnesses? Where to keep originals? Next to the last one, she'd written in parentheses, not the drawer, Elena will raid for chocolate. I laughed. It sounded like a hiccup. Hope nudged me in the ribs. I screenshotted the document, printed it, set it next to my elbow like a talisman. Ping, a notification. A reply from Wilkes, the document examiner. Send me clear scans of any signature samples from around that year. Bills, letters, pen type too. If your aunt had a preferred pen, find one. Preferred pen. I glanced at the mug on the counter stuffed with ballpoints and farmer's market freebies. My aunt had always used the same cheap blue pen with a crack down the barrel, said it knew her. I rummaged through drawers until I found 3 that looked like cousins to the memory. One still worked. I wrote my name, her name, my aunt's favorite phrase to test nibs, pan dulce is life, then photographed everything in the sharp, unforgiving light by the sink. I emailed Wilkes. I CC'd Clara. And then I called the number that had left the voicemail. Mr. Patel? I said when a voice, thin and cautious, answered, yes? This is Elena Ramirez. You notarized a document 5 years ago, allegedly. I need to ask what you remember. Silence. I heard a TV in the background, a moderator asking someone to stay with us after the break. Then Mr. Patel said, I remember many things, this I do not. My ledger would remember better. Your old shop's ledger doesn't show me on that date. That shop had a leak. Paper got damaged. He sighed, and the sigh carried a whole tired life. I kept copies sometimes in a personal file, Sloppy, against best practice, but... He paused. I can look. Please, I said. I pressed my fingers to the bridge of my nose like I could pinch the desperation back in. Call tomorrow, he said. Give me a day. After I hung up, the house felt too small for my nerves. I took Daisy out. The pasture wore its mourning like a shawl. Dew beaded on the foxtails. A rabbit ran, scandalized by our presence. I walked the fence line and thought of my aunt's list. Where to keep originals? Not the drawer. Then where? When we came back in, I went straight to the pantry. Top shelf, behind the flour, nothing. Behind the black beans, nothing. I stood on the step stool and pushed aside a shoebox full of old seed packets, the paper papery like moth wings. And there, thin as a secret, was a folder with my aunt's handwriting on the tab, Life. I sat on the floor with it. Daisy lay down beside me, chin on paws, eyes tracking my hands. Inside the folder were plastic sleeves, each with their own neat label. Deed, will, draft, ask questions, copy, conservation easement info, letters from Elena's school, tax prep. Don't lose again, PLs. I flipped through slowly, the way you peel a sticker off a favorite jar. No transfer contract, no smoking gun. But in the copy conservation easement info sleeve, I found a brochure from the Green Fund dated 6 years ago, corners worn, paragraphs underlined by my aunt's impatient pen. Next to a line about irrevocable development rights, she'd scrawled, yes, protect. Next to a line about grantors and grantees, she'd scribbled, make sure both names. There were stars, 3 of them. I exhaled and didn't realize until then I'd been holding my breath. I took photos. I texted Clara, found Aunt's notes on easement. She wanted protection, not transfer. Evidence of intent? Clara replied with a thumbs up and a sentence. Intent supports narrative. Authenticity kills their doc. Keep digging. You ever get that feeling 2 stories are wrestling? Yours and the version someone else wants to publish with your name on it? My aunt's stars on a brochure weren't a legal hammer, but they were mine. They were ours. They felt like a light coming on in a warehouse. Back at the table, I opened my laptop again. I typed the name of the copy shop down on Westmont into Maps, then Street View, then a search that coughed up a Yelp page with a single cranky review from 4 years ago. The photo showed the counter. My pulse jumped. In the background, a cheap wall clock. On the clock, a tiny metal plaque. I zoomed in until the pixels groaned. The plaque read, security camera in use. I called Clara. What if they had a camera? What if footage exists? Even stills? Her inhale came through crisp like a beginning. 4 years ago is a stretch, she said, but the owner might keep backups. Even if not, the presence of a camera is good cross-pressure if opposing claims a notarization happened off hours. I emailed myself the photo. Then I crawled through my aunt's old laptop. Yes, I still have it. Yes, it's slow. Yes, the wallpaper is a photo of a pie I failed at, until I found a folder called Taxes, Final, really this one. Inside were scans she took of everything she handed to anyone official. I searched by file type, by date, by name. I found a scan of the deed when we refinanced the tractor, a scan of my aunt's ID, a scan of the pet vaccination record because she treated Daisy like a celebrity. What I didn't find was any scan of a transfer contract. If we had signed something that seismic, she would have scanned it. She scanned receipts for coffee beans. She scanned the note the mailman left when the box of drip nozzles wouldn't fit in the slot. Clack, clack, clack. I renamed files. I made a master folder called Case, Truth, and dropped everything in like pebbles in a jar. Wilkes pinged again. Your aunt's pen looked like a cheap gel. Notice the skipping on loops. The contract's signature shows ballpoint behavior, with consistent flow, no gel pooling, not definitive, add to pile, add to pile. That became my prayer, add to pile, add to pile. Around lunch, I drove to the county office to ask about notarizations. The woman at the window wore glasses on a chain and knew everyone's cousin. She frowned at me in a way that held kindness and bureaucracy in a neat braid. "We don't get notary logs," she said. "Private business." "But I can tell you if the notary was registered then," she typed. "He was." I thanked her. I used the ladies' room to splash water on my face and to cry without Daisy watching me. Then I wiped my eyes and got back in the truck because truth is not found by decorative sadness. At home, I pulled out shoeboxes. I dug up a spiral notebook where my aunt tracked egg production like a sports commentator. Ruby 4, Goldie 3, everyone else lazy. In the margin next to the contested date, Elena at farm all day, drip fix, Mr. Ortiz stopped by with peaches. I could hear Mr. Ortiz's laugh. I could smell those peaches. I wrote his name on a Post-it labeled Witnesses and stuck it to my laptop. Then I opened photos on my phone. 5 years ago, that month, that day. One picture, a sunset over the back field, long stripes of orange laid like silk, time-stamped 5/12 p.m. Another, my muddy boots, my aunt's slippers, toes pointing toward the same tangle of hoses we were fixing, time-stamped 10:47 a.m. On my aunt's phone, still in the drawer, still holding her life like a tin keepsake, I found a video of Daisy trying to dig a gopher hole twice her size, my aunt's laugh. The clock on the wall catching the corner of the frame. It was all so normal it could make you scream. Metadata doesn't lie. Or, if it lies, it leaves fingerprints. I exported everything with metadata intact and put them into the Case, Truth folder. I added notes, context for day, location, farm, presence, consistent. It felt almost clinical. It felt like building a bridge one nail at a time across a canyon where parts of me were still falling. As the afternoon leaned toward evening, Clara called. "Quick update," she said. Opposing counsel sent a scan of the notary's seal at higher resolution. Wilkes says the emboss looks off-center. He also says the date formatting is inconsistent with that notary's typical stamp style 6 years ago. Patel usually put a comma after the month. Tiny, but if we can verify with other samples. "I have samples," I cut in Auntie's tax folder. She notarized something with Patel the year before. The stamp has a comma. Send now. Clack, clack, clack. Attach, attach, attach. Send. Silence on the line while Clara read, the way you can hear thinking if you've been on the phone with someone long enough. Then, "This helps. A pattern is a story. Judges like stories that are true and tidy. I can do tidy," I said. "True is the point." "You're doing great," she said, and I believed her enough to keep going. When the light went gold, Mr. Ortiz texted back. "I remember that day. I brought peaches. You gave me jalapenos." Your aunt laughed at how I pronounced it. "Why?" I told him. He sent 3 angry face emojis, my first emojis from a 70-year-old man, and then I can write a statement. I wrote dates in my book. My daughter will help. I put my forehead on the cool table and breathed. The wood smelled like all the dinners we'd eaten there. The house creaked like an old friend stretching. Outside, the pump thudded alive. Daisy flopped and groaned dramatically, like she had been the one mining the internet for evidence all day. A DM slid into my Instagram from a local reporter I didn't love. Off record, sources say your parents have documentary proof you lied. Want to comment? I typed, deleted, typed again, and then wrote what I needed to write for me as much as for them. The truth is quieter than gossip. When I'm ready, I'll show it. For now, no comment. I set the phone down like it was hot. Night settled like a soft weight. I closed the laptop and opened my aunt's important papers folder again, this time to take out her draft will I'd run from before because reading it felt like letting a ghost hold my face. I read it now. Her words were plain and kind and stubborn. She had written, I leave the farm to Elena because it is hers in spirit already. I leave the choice of how to protect it to her because she has earned that choice. There were crossings out and rewrites and a little doodle of a chicken in the margin. No legal force, not in draft form, but intent. Intent like an arrow pointing only one direction. I typed a note for Clara. Found draft will. Language indicates intent for me to decide, not pre-signed transfer. Will scan in morning. When I finally stood up, my back popped. I fed Daisy and ate a bowl of cereal in that absent animal way you do when your mind is off somewhere else working under a flashlight. I rinsed the bowl, set it to dry, and went to the porch with a blanket to do the last thing on the list. Breathe. The sky was loud with stars. Somewhere down the road, a truck shifted gears with an old man's groan. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and thought about all the tiny things that add up to a life and how easy it is to reduce them to a signature when you want to steal. People think a story turns on big moments. Slammed doors, judges' gavels, the sharp intake of breath when someone says, "We need to talk." But it turns on apricot jam recipes with smudged measurements, on texts that say peaches, on pan dulce is life, written in gel ink, on commas or the absence of them. If you're still with me, this is the messy part I promised. The detective work that doesn't look like TV, the keyboard sounds no one scores with violins, the way hope shows up not as a trumpet, but as a post-it note with a witness's name scrawled sideways. I don't know whether Mr. Patel's personal file will save me. I don't know if the Green Fund will stay patient. I don't know if the judge will tilt toward tidy truth or noisy drama. I do know this. I am walking toward the light switch with both hands out, and I can feel the wall now. If you've ever had to do that, find the switch in a room built to keep you stumbling, you know that moment when your fingers brush plastic? That electric little hope? That's where I am. Fingers on the edge, clack. One more email to Clara. Subject line, evidence dump. Day's end. Attachments, photos, scans, metadata, Mr. Ortiz's contact, Auntie's list, comma stamp, the video of Daisy with the gopher hole. In the body I typed, here's everything. Tomorrow we chase Patel's file. Thank you. I hovered over send. Then I pressed the key. If you want to hear how the switch flips, how these scraps become a voice in a room that matters, stay. Because the next thing that happened lit up everything. The courtroom smelled like old polish and paper. You know that library smell? It was like that, but with judgment baked in, my palms were damp. I could hear the whisper of my own breath under the low hum of the AC. A clock on the wall ticked loud enough to feel rude. I sat behind counsel table on the right. Clara was to my left, calm the way surgeons pretend to be calm. She had tabs and highlights and that poker face I'd been borrowing since this started. Across the aisle, my parents looked composed, new suits, matching pens. Their lawyer had a smile that didn't mean joy. You've seen that smile before, right? The we're about to win smile. The judge came in, everyone rose. My knees wobbled, but I stood straight. I thought about my aunt squeezing my fingers once in a hospital hallway years ago. "Feet under you," she'd said. "Always with your feet under you," I planted them. "Good morning," the judge said, and settled behind the bench. His voice was sanded smooth. He looked at both tables over his glasses. We're here on Ramirez v. Ramirez. I have the filings. Counsel, let's keep it tight." My parents' lawyer stood first. He buttoned his jacket and launched into a speech that had been rehearsed in a mirror. "Your Honor, the matter is simple. My clients possess a signed transfer contract dated 5 years ago. The notary's seal is on its face. The respondent, Ms. Elena Ramirez, held the land in trust, then reneged. We submit the original today." He held up a manila folder like it was Moses's tablets. He walked it to the clerk. The paper slid across wood. The sound scraped my nerves. Clara leaned toward me. "Breathe," she whispered. Like a cue, I breathed. The judge glanced at the document. "We'll get to that." He nodded to our table. "Respondent?" Clara stood. "Your Honor, we'll address the alleged contract head-on. But before that, we ask permission to present a sequence, brief, providing context and chain of custody for Ms. Ramirez's records and the foundation for our expert's conclusion regarding the signature's authenticity." "Proceed," the judge said. Clara clicked the remote. The first slide appeared on the court screen. No drama, just facts. My aunt's list. Questions for notary plus lawyer. The bullet point with my chocolate drawer joke drew the faintest smile from the judge. Then the calendar entries from that day. Drip line, seed potatoes, watch sunset, no notary. My parents' lawyer rose. "Objection, relevance at this stage." "Overruled," the judge said, not looking away from the screen. "Foundation," Clara continued. "Photos, the metadata timestamps. Me and my aunt's feet, toes in the tangle of hoses. The sunset at 5:12 p.m. The video of Daisy trying to excavate the world. Another objection, another overrule. The judge took notes with a fountain pen that left a confident line. I felt something loosen between my shoulder blades. Not victory, not yet. Just the feeling of being heard without interruption. Then Clara said, "Your Honor, we call Mr. Wilkes." He took the stand with a briefcase that had seen every airport. He was the kind of man you don't remember until he starts to speak, and you realize he knows the texture of ink. He laid out his credentials without flourish. Forensic document examiner, 20 years, court-qualified expert in multiple jurisdictions. Then he turned to the screen where Clara had cued 2 signatures side by side. "This," he said, pointing to the one on the alleged contract, "is purportedly Ms. Ramirez's signature. My name looked like my name, but not like my hand." It was a mask with the eyes cut wrong. "And this," he said, pointing to a dozen signatures taken from the same year. Checks, letters to the seed co-op, a cute note I'd written my aunt on a post-it, are genuine exemplars. He talked about line quality, pressure. The tiny pauses where a pen lifts before crossing a T. He talked about gel ink versus ballpoint. How gel pools at the ends of strokes if the writer hesitates. How ballpoint slides. The alleged signature had the glide, not the pools. He zoomed in on the comma style after my first name, a tick I have when I'm writing fast. The contract signature had no tick. He circled micro tremors where someone unfamiliar tried to mimic a flourish and overcorrected. It sounded like wizardry. It was science. My parents' lawyer cross-examined with that smile again. "Mr. Wilkes, your field is subjective, is it not?" "It's judgment based on measurable features," Wilkes said, all patience. "And reproducible comparisons? Isn't it true that under certain stress, signatures vary?" "They do," Wilkes said. "This is not variation. This is simulation." The lawyer tasted the air for a new angle. "You also note a notary seal. Are you a stamp expert now?" "I noted the emboss offset and the date format," Wilkes said. compared to known samples from the same notary. He looked at the judge. It's atypical, Your Honor. Clara slid in the exhibits. Notarizations from the year before, the comma after the month. The judge's pen paused, then moved again. He nodded once. A small, careful nod. My parents' lawyer pivoted to drama. Your Honor, this is theatrics. We have the original. Originals are king. He put his hand on the manila folder like swearing to it. The judge held out his palm. The clerk brought the document up. Paper changed hands. The court became the inside of a held breath. Even the AC seemed to lean in to listen. My parents' lawyer smiled at me. Recognize that, Ms. Ramirez? I looked at the page. My hand felt light, like it could float. The letters on the signature line spelled my name, but the bones were wrong. No, I said. My voice didn't shake. It startled me by not shaking. I've never signed that. He made a tisk sound he wore like a tie. Of course you would say that. Clara stood. Your Honor, if I may, before we move further into he said, she said, the judge raised a palm. Counsel, we'll do this one step at a time. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the page. He traced the embossed seal with one finger the way my aunt used to trace the veins on leaves. He flipped to the second page, third. He lifted the paper to the light. We all watched him read, tick, tick, tick. He set the contract down. Let's hear the notary, he said. Mr. Patel took the stand with a careful walk. He looked older than his voice had sounded on the phone. I wanted to find softness in his eyes. What I found was exhaustion. He was sworn in. He sat. Mr. Patel, my parents' lawyer began, did you notarize this document on this date? My ledger from that period was damaged, Mr. Patel said, voice thin. There was a leak in the ceiling. Many pages were ruined. So, you cannot confirm, the lawyer said, pleased. Mr. Patel rubbed the side of his nose. I kept some personal copies when I remembered, against best practice. He glanced at me. Just a flick. I looked after I was called. I did not find this. People misplace things, the lawyer said brightly. But you were employed as a notary, yes? Yes. Your seal is on that document, yes? It appears so, Mr. Patel said, choosing each word like stepping stones in a stream. But my style then included a comma after the month. And my embosser had a slightly crooked O, I checked. This, he swallowed. This looks neat. The room shifted. Not much enough. Clara stood like a teacher who knows the answer. Mr. Patel, if presented with other documents you notarized that year, would you recognize your stamp pattern? Yes. We showed him the exhibits. He nodded at each, slow. Comma, he said. Crooked O. And on the alleged contract? No comma, he said. Perfect O. My parents' lawyer tried to rescue something from the fire. Embossers get replaced. Not that year, Mr. Patel said. I remember the crooked O. People teased me. He made a small smile that didn't reach anything. I was embarrassed. A murmur ran along the benches. The judge tapped his pen once. The sound pulled every eye back to the bench. Order, without the gavel. Clara exhaled beside me, almost imperceptible. Then she said, Your Honor, we ask to play a short clip, 60 seconds. The copy shop on Westmont, security camera footage. My parents' lawyer objected so quickly the word tripped. Foundation. Overruled if she can lay it, the judge said. Clara laid it. The shop had a cheap camera. The owner had kept a rolling month of footage and backups. His kid, a patient saint, had dug through an old external drive the night before. We had stills from the alleged date. The footage showed a quiet afternoon. A college kid printing a zine. A grandma faxing a form with help from the clerk. No me, no my aunt. No anyone with my face or her slippers. The timestamp sat there like granite. The judge watched the clip with his chin resting on his hand. He didn't blink much. When the minute ended, the screen went black. The room felt colder. Anything further? He asked, voice neutral. the way a lake looks flat before a storm. My parents' lawyer held to his smile like a cliff ledge. "The best evidence is the original," he repeated. "This is noise." Clara looked at me. That look that says, "You ready?" I nodded without thinking. She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, Ms. Ramirez would like to make a brief statement about her signature and present 2 additional exhibits." "Keep it brief," he said. I stood. My legs obeyed. I walked to the TV screen like I was walking into the video of Daisy tunneling the earth. "Hi," I said, then winced at my own "hi." "Your Honor, I'm not a scientist. I'm a farmer. I sign seed invoices and thank you notes. I also sign big things with both hands on the pen. I know how my hand moves. The signature on that contract is wearing my name like a costume." I clicked. The screen showed 2 close-ups. The curve of the R in Ramirez across 10 check images, always with a tiny hitch where my pen catches and pushes off. Then the same curve on the contract, smooth, unbroken, like someone traced a font. "That hitch?" I said. "It's where a cheap gel pen pools when I hesitate. I used the same cheap pen for years, like a superstition." I held up one of my aunt's cracked barrel blues. People smiled, even the judge. "The contract looks like ballpoint. I don't own one." I clicked again. The second exhibit wasn't flashy. Just a page from my aunt's draft will, with her doodled chicken, and the sentence, "I leave the choice of how to protect it to her, because she has earned that choice." "This isn't a contract," I said, "but it's her voice." And her voice never said, "Transfer this to someone who left me." I set the clicker down. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the judge, because the bench is where you are supposed to be heard. Clara returned to the podium. Her tone dropped half a degree. "You know that tone? The one where a story lands and you feel the ground underneath it?" "Your Honor," she said, "the law values 2 things here: intent and authenticity. The alleged contract lacks both. We ask that it be excluded as fraudulent. We ask that the court admonish any further reliance on it. And we ask that the record reflect the chain of evidence we've presented today. Silence, real silence. Like the air set its coffee down. 1 second, 2, 3. The judge looked at the contract in front of him like it was something that had lied to his face. He tapped his pen again, then he spoke, and his voice lost the sanded smoothness and got honest. "This signature..." He paused. The kind of pause that makes time lean forward is fake. There it was. The sentence my ribs had been bracing for. My parents' lawyer started to object, then swallowed it whole. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father went still, like stillness could erase everything that moved in the last 5 minutes. From the back row, someone let out a breath like they'd been underwater. The judge continued, restoring the furniture of procedure. "The notary's testimony, the expert's analysis, the corroborating evidence, and the video clips create a clear picture. The document is unreliable. It will not be admitted. Counsel for petitioners, I am giving you the opportunity to withdraw it rather than litigate its provenance further today." My parents' lawyer nodded stiffly. "We withdraw." "Good," the judge said. "Then we can return to the actual dispute, which concerns ownership as conveyed by the deed and any valid agreements, Ms. Ramirez owns this farm until I say otherwise. Nothing I've heard today convinces me otherwise." Clara squeezed my knee under the table. It was small. It was everything. I didn't cry. I thought I would. Instead, I felt the most ordinary sensation. Relief walking in like someone late to a party, hair messy, laughing, arms full of air. The room had light in it again. The wood looked less stern. Even the clock sounded friendly. We still had miles to go, motions, hearings, the public mess that comes after private battles. But that moment, that sentence, it was a hinge. The door didn't open all the way, but it swung. And I was standing on the side where my aunt's voice could still be heard. Outside, on the courthouse steps, reporters waited, microphones like bouquets. Clara did the talking. Her words were crisp and careful. I watched birds cartwheel over the traffic and thought about commas, about crooked O's, about how truth is not loud, but it endures. If you're still with me, thank you. I know the road here was rough. Truth doesn't travel straight. But when it arrives, even in one clean line from a bench, it rearranges the air in your lungs. If you want to see what that line set in motion, how boundaries feel when you finally draw them with ink that's yours, stay. And tell me in the comments, would you have stood up in that room, or would you have walked away? They didn't call first. Of course they didn't. They just drove up the gravel the way thunder rolls in, slow, loud, sure of itself. I was on the porch with a chipped mug and a list for the morning. The kettle had left steam ghosts on the kitchen window. Daisy twitched in her sleep. Crickets were warming up. The blue hour turned the fields to velvet, and then headlights washed the siding pale. I knew that engine. I knew that rhythm, the hard stop, the little rev, as if a car could clear its throat. My chest did that old, stupid thing, the flinch of maybe this time. Maybe they're here to say the words right. I caught the thought like you catch a mosquito against your skin. Then I let it go. Doors opened. Quiet voices. The smell of their aftershave reached me before their faces did. Something bought at an airport. I didn't get up. I didn't go down the steps. Let the hill do the talking. Lena, my mother said, using a name she hadn't earned in 20 years. She smiled the way people smile at security cameras. You look healthy. My father hung back like a shadow that didn't know where to fall. His hands were empty. No flowers, no pie. Just that lawyer's posture, softened at the edges, like a suit left out in the rain. The last time I saw his eyes up close, I'd been shorter and he'd been leaving. I nodded at the porch rail. There's space to sit. I didn't say please. Boundaries start small. What you offer, what you don't. They took the bench. The wood creaked a story it has told for decades. My mug was warm against my fingers. I watched steam drift upward and disappear. We shouldn't have, my mother said. She swallowed the rest of the sentence like it was the rind of something sour. The court today, it was unexpected. You mean the truth was inconvenient, I said. My voice came out flat, no sharp edges, just the weight of a door closing. My father cleared his throat. We're not here to fight. He glanced toward the fields like he might find his next line in the corn. We're here because family... I cut him off. Family is who shows up when there's no camera. Silence lapped at our ankles. Crickets. A moth banged itself silly on the porch light and then learned. The gravel in the driveway settled. My mother leaned forward. The bench gave a little squeal. We did what we had to do, she whispered. We were drowning back then. You were complicated. Your aunt made it easy to leave you. She wanted you. She wanted me, I said. Full stop. I felt the words in my ribs. She wanted me. My father spread his hands, palms up, as if he could offer me air. We're not proud, he said. We can say that. We're sorry about the contract. He shot a quick look at my mother, the kind couples exchange when truth and strategy collide. We didn't think it would get this far, meaning honest. This far, meaning in front of a judge with a pen that writes facts. What do you want? I asked. Not mean, just clean. The porch light hummed. Night was fully here now. The fields smelled like cut grass and turned soil and the ghosts of last summer's tomatoes. My mother's eyes shone in the way eyes do when someone has practiced tears. We want to be a family again, she said. We want a second chance. My father nodded, quick. We can work something out, he added, moving from apology to negotiation in a breath, because men like him were taught early that every conversation is a chessboard. We can help with the farm, we can— Stop, I said. Pattern interrupt. No music, no gentle bed under the moment. Just the porch and my voice and the old boards holding us all up. He did stop. The word hung between us like a line drawn on a map. You're standing on land you tried to steal, I said. You told a court I signed away the only place I have ever felt safe. You called me a liar, and now you want to— help? I let the last word sit like a nail on the table. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a napkin she'd brought, an object that made me weirdly furious. Who brings their own napkin to cry with? We were desperate, she said. Your brother— Don't, I said, and my voice did something I've never let it do around them. It lifted, just enough to move leaves. Don't outsource your choices to a person who isn't here to answer for them. I tasted iron. It was not blood. It was restraint. They looked at each other. The moth tried the glass again. Daisy, inside, woofed in her dreams. You're being cruel, my mother said softly. No, I said. I'm being clear. She flinched. Clarity can feel like a slap when you're used to fog. My father tried a new tactic. He put his elbows on his knees. He let his head droop just enough to say, I'm tired. It's just, he sighed, made of theater, made of bone. We didn't have the tools, Lena, to be your parents. We didn't have the models. We came from nothing. I come from nothing, I said. That's the point. And then I came from her. I nodded toward the kitchen window, where the reflection of her picture frame sat ghosted in the glass, my aunt in her straw hat, forever mid-laugh. She taught me to stake tomatoes, to stake myself, to say yes when I mean yes and no when I mean no. So here it is, no. My mother blinked. No. What? No to you on this porch, asking for a second chance the same week you forged a first one. I held their eyes, one and then the other. No to pretending this hurt less because you're sorry now. No to shrinking my life to fit inside your emergency. No to setting myself on fire so you can warm your hands. My father's tongue clicked behind his teeth. He looked at the field again and found nothing. You can't mean forever, he said. Forever is a trick, I said. I only have today. Today, you don't come in. He took that in like a man takes in a cold plunge. Fast, shocked, cleansing, unwelcome. My mother leaned back. The bench moaned. She put the napkin away. Something honest crossed her face, a flash of what I think is called recognition, not of me, of the wall. And if we need help? She asked after a long minute, her voice small, all the big tools dropped at the door. If things get worse. You call the number you called when you decided to sue me, I said. You call a lawyer. You call a therapist. You call each other. But you do not call my boundary by any other name. For a moment, just a breath, I wanted to soften it. We are trained to cushion our truths with pillows, to hand out blankets and cookies and apologies for existing. A picture flashed in my mind. I was 8. I had stood by the screen door and counted their suitcases. 1, 2, 3. I had counted the red taillights disappearing down the lane. 1, 2. I had held my breath until my aunt said, Sweetheart, you're allowed to breathe. My lungs learned me again that day. They learned me again now. I inhaled, full. I let the night in. I let the porch and the crickets and the moth and the warm mug and my whole 30-something years settle into their places like jars on a shelf. I'm not shutting the door on forgiveness, I said, because I needed to tell the truth even if it was inconvenient. Forgiveness belongs to me. It's not a coupon you can redeem. It's not a trade. It's a garden I will tend when I'm ready, and maybe it will grow wild, and maybe it won't. But the gate is mine to open. My father nodded like he was trying on the shape of those words. My mother looked as if someone had told her winter had rules she had never learned. She rubbed her arms. It had gotten cold without my noticing. He stood first. The bench, relieved, exhaled. You won today, he said, Not unkind, not kind. Congratulations. It's not about winning, I said. It's about telling the truth louder than the lie. He looked at me, really looked, the way a person looks at a landscape they used to own in a dream. Your aunt would be proud, he said. She always was, I answered. He nodded once, and then again, like he'd finally located his hat in a room he didn't recognize. He walked down the steps. My mother stayed sitting, staring at her hands. The moth finally figured it out and slid toward the dark. Lena, she said, and the word cracked on her tongue. What do I call you now? Elena, I said. It's always been Elena. You just didn't stay long enough to hear it. I stood. My knees didn't wobble. My feet were under me, always under me. I walked to the door. My hand found the knob. The screen sighed. Daisy's nails clicked across the floor to greet me, a soft battering ram of joy. My mother turned at the sound. A laugh escaped her, small, real, unwilling. We looked at each other through the mesh. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. What if it's you? She asked. It isn't, I said. Not right now. She nodded, slow. She stood. She smoothed her skirt like smoothing could fix it. She went down the steps. Her heels found the ruts they'd made carrying their suitcases once. Gravel spoke under weight, the language of leaving. At the car door, she looked back. You know we tried, she said. I nodded. You tried today, I said. It matters. It doesn't change the lock. They got in. The engine coughed, then settled. Headlights swung across the yard, across the apple tree, across the swing my aunt hung with that crooked smile of victory because she'd insisted she could do it herself. The lights found the wooden sign near the lane. Ramirez Farm, letters carved with a kitchen knife and stubbornness. Dust lifted behind the car like a veil, then nothing. Just night, just the sound of a kettle figuring itself out on the stove. Inside, I turned the burner off. I poured what was left into 2 mugs out of habit and put one by the picture frame. It fogged the glass where her smile was. I wiped the fog away with my sleeve. I walked to the back door. The field under moonlight looked like a body at rest. I could see the fence line in silver. I could see the tidy rows we did by hand that first spring. My aunt used to say boundaries are not walls, they are trellises. They teach things where to climb. They keep fruit in the sun. So I said it out loud, to the night, to the dirt, to whatever part of me was still 8 years old, counting suitcases like stars. Family is who stays, not who abandons. It felt like a key turning, not a slam, a click. My phone buzzed on the counter. Messages from neighbors, from Clara, from kids who had planted seedlings in the south bed last summer and never stopped sending me pictures of the basil they murdered and resurrected. I didn't open any. I put the phone face down. I put my palms on the table my aunt had sanded until it was a sermon on patience. The grain under my skin felt like a map back to myself. You still with me? I know that was a lot. Boundaries are loud in your own ears when you've lived your life whispering. They can sound like cruelty to people who benefited from your silence. But sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for them, for you, for every dinner you'll ever sit through with your shoulders down, is to say no, and mean it, and keep meaning it after the car lights vanish. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone who shares your blood, tell me, what did your voice do? Did it shake? Did it bloom? Would you do it again? Drop your story in the comments. Someone who needs permission to keep their gate closed might read it and breathe easier tonight. The morning after the verdict, the sky looked rinsed clean, crisp blue, air like new sheets. I woke up before the alarm because my bones remembered joy faster than my brain did. Daisy stretched, sneezed twice, and pressed her cold nose to my wrist like, hey, we did it. I laughed into the pillow. Have you ever laughed before your eyes are open? It's like the body answers a question the mind hasn't asked yet. I put coffee on. The kettle hummed. The house smelled like toast and timber and 100 old summers. I stood at the sink and watched the first sun spill gold over the south field. The rose we had carved last season caught the light and threw it back. It felt like the land was saying good morning for real, not just out of habit. On the porch, the mug warmed both hands. Birds were busy. The walnut tree flicked little green flags. Dust motes hovered in the diagonal sun like tiny planets. The sign on the post still read, Ramirez Farm, hand-carved, stubborn, true. I wanted to kiss it. Don't worry, I didn't. But I did run my thumb over the R like a prayer. My phone buzzed on the railing. Neighbors, reporters, the Cuisinne board, the high school teacher with the big earrings who always signs emails with 3 exclamation points. I didn't open any of that first. I just held the phone face down for a minute and let the quiet be loud. Then I texted one person, "Clara, we're on." She called instead of typing, I mean, we start today. You're serious. I'm planted. She whooped in my ear, a pure, ridiculous sound. "I've got lists," she said. Of course she did. "I'll bring the banner." The kids from the after-school program are already harassing me about when they can plant something legal. I laughed. "Tell them noon. Bring gloves and snacks. Please, snacks." When I hung up, I breathed in deep, as if I could inhale a decade of worry and exhale it as steam. Have you ever noticed that relief has a weight? It isn't weightless. It's heavy, but in the way a quilt is heavy. It presses you down to the place you're meant to be. By 9, the lane was a parade. Old F-150S, 2 Subarus. A bicycle with a plastic crate zip-tied to the back full of trowels. Mr. Nguyen from the feed store brought a sack of seed and little paper cups of iced coffee. Mrs. Avery from next door arrived with muffins and a folding table she swore was only slightly haunted. The high school kids tumbled out of a van smelling like axe and hope. Their voices bounced off the barn siding and came back brighter. We opened the big door of the old tractor shed, and it yawned like a stage taking its first breath. Inside, dust, an old wasp nest, empty, thank God, and the bones of a place that could hold learning. We swept, we sneezed. We found a box of my aunt's hand-painted signs. Wash your boots, ask the soil first. Drink water, then keep going. I propped them where people would see and feel seen. Clara arrived with a roll of butcher paper and giant markers. "We need a name," she said, eyebrows up like punctuation. "The center. What do we call this?" Everyone shouted ideas while we dragged tables into the light. "Green Roots Lab. Future Farmers Hub. Auntie's House." That last one hit me in the ribs in the best way. I swallowed the ache, the good kind. "What about," I said, slow, tasting it, "Roots of Tomorrow?" It went quiet in that special way silence does when a room nods at once. Then the kids said it together to see how it felt in their mouths. Roots of Tomorrow. One boy, tall, shy, repeated it softer, like it belonged to him. Done. We wrote it big in marker, taped it to the barn door, and the paper wrinkled a little in the breeze like a living thing. By noon, the south field wore a crowd. I cut the ribbon. Okay, truth. We didn't have a ribbon. I cut a piece of red baling twine with a pocket knife that has my aunt's initials scratched into the handle. Everyone cheered anyway. Cheering is cheap and valuable. We need more of it. We started the first workshop under the hickory tree because the light there feels like permission. I showed the kids how to test soil with a jar and water. We lined the glass up and watched silt settle. "This," I said, tapping the jar, "is what patience looks like when the sun can see it." A girl with chipped blue nail polish nodded like she understood something about her own life she couldn't say out loud. A boy in a hoodie asked if the worms had names. "They don't now," I said, "but they could." He christened the biggest one Miguel and saluted. I almost cried over a worm, don't tell anyone. We planted starters, tomatoes, basil, marigolds to keep the bugs honest. Each pair of hands pressed a little green hope into a shallow bed, then tucked it in with soil the way you tuck a child. I showed them how not to break the stem. Gentle, I said. Gentle keeps things alive. The world is so rough. It feels rebellious to teach softness. Between rows, Clara organized a station for compost tea. She lectured about microbes with the zeal of a late-night preacher. The teens leaned in. When she said the words, bacterial party, they lost it, someone dabbed. Someone else took notes like this would be on a test, and I realized it would be, just not the kind with grades. At 2, the Cuisinart folks rolled up. 3 of them in logo windbreakers, one in a dress that shouldn't have gone anywhere near mud. Their director stepped out first, eyes scanning the field like inventory. I walked over with dirt on my knees and joy in my throat. "Elena," she said, already smiling, already softer than the version who had almost pulled funding when the lawsuit hit. "We saw the headlines this morning." She held out an envelope. It was lighter than it should have been and heavier than I expected. The board voted at 8, full support, multi-year. I exhaled a laugh that sounded like a tire finding road. "Thank you," I said. 2 words, 1,000 meanings. What I meant was, for not running, for believing the truth, for showing up today, not when it's easy. She scanned the chaos, the jars, the worms, the kids shouting Miguel every time they saw a new one. "Looks like you started without us," she said. "We had 20 years of waiting to make up for," I said. She nodded. "Then we're late," she replied, and rolled up her sleeves. I forgave her dress. Afternoon leaned warm. Shadows stretched long, lazy like cats. We taught seed saving with paper envelopes and pencils. The kids wrote their names, then the varieties, like they were labeling futures. Jamal, Cherokee Purple. Mia, Genovese Basil. One boy just wrote mine. I respected the honesty. A local reporter came by, hair in a tight ponytail, microphone in a tote instead of in my face. "Can I just watch?" she asked. I nodded. She watched. Sometimes watching is the best form of telling. Around 4, we took a break. Lemonade muffins, fingers stained green, a chorus of, "Did you see that grub?" And, "Someone post this." I stood with my back against the barn door and let the scene soak through my shirt. It hit me then, not like a wave, like a tide that has been coming in for years and finally touches your toes. We had made a place, not a product, not a performance, a place. I slipped inside the house to grab the first aid kit because someone always underestimates a rose. In the kitchen, light pooled on the table. On the corner sat the box I'd avoided all morning, the box from the top shelf of my aunt's closet, the one I brought down after the verdict because I just knew, there was something in there for this moment. I lifted the lid. Letters, seed packets. A Polaroid of me at 9 with missing teeth and dirt mustache. And an envelope with my name on it in her careful looping hand. Elena, the ESWAM. I sat. The chair creaked like an old friend telling me to listen. My fingers hesitated on the flap. Have you ever slowed down because you didn't want to use up the last bit of something precious? That was me. Right then, starting and stopping like a porch swing in wind, I opened it. Her paper smelled like cedar in summer. I began to read. "Kiddo," it started, because of course it did. "If you're reading this, you're holding the line I always knew you would hold." I swallowed. The letters wavered and snapped back into focus. "I didn't know the shape of your battles, only the shape of you, sturdy, soft, both. If the family that left you ever comes back with empty hands but big mouths, remember? There's a difference between forgiving a person and handing them your keys." I laughed once, a sound that bruised on the way out. She always wrote like she spoke. One hand on your shoulder, the other pointing at the sky. "I hope you've made this farm loud with children." I looked out the window at the hickory shade thick with teenagers. I hope you tell them the truth about tomatoes, that they split when they get too much water all at once, that they taste best when neglected just enough to toughen up, that it's okay to be needy and okay to be strong and okay to be both in the same hour. Water started in my eyes without permission. I let it. It salted the paper in little moons. And if you've built that training center we talked about when the roof leaked and we ate popcorn for dinner, bless it. Bless it with your yes and your no. Remember that your no is a gate, not a wall. Good things grow behind gates. I looked at the back door. The hinge I oiled last winter winked in the sun. Last thing, family is chosen. Sometimes you choose the people who share your face. Sometimes you choose the kids who ruin your garden and make you laugh. Sometimes you choose the dog who keeps stealing your socks. Always, always choose yourself too. Put your feet on your land, say your name out loud, and know I am saying it too, wherever I am. It ended with her old joke, "Eat the ugly tomatoes first." I folded the letter back along its tired crease and held it at my heart like you hold a photograph in wind. Silence happened around me, not empty, full. I carried the letter outside. Clara caught my eye, saw the red in it, and didn't say a thing. She just brushed dirt off a bench with her forearm and nodded. I stood on the boards and the kids scuffed closer. The Cuisinne director moved in, hands still muddy. The neighbors formed a half circle. The walnut tree tossed light. "Can I read you something?" I asked. They went quiet. Even the gnats seemed to hover with purpose, I read. I didn't perform. I just let her words walk into the air and sit down. When I got to the part about keys, 3 adults made soft sounds of recognition. When I said family is chosen, a girl with blue nails looked at her friend like a decision had just been made. When I finished, I didn't say anything for a long beat. Not a big dramatic pause. Just enough space for the day to breathe. The pattern interrupt was the quiet. You could hear soil settling. A crow argued with someone far off and lost. Then the kid who named the worm raised his hand like we were in school. "So," he said, "we grow stuff, but we also grow us?" "Exactly," I said. "We grow futures that feed us back." He nodded, solemn as a preacher. "Okay," he said. "Cool." We laughed, not loud. Just the kind of laughter that loosens the bolts in your chest. The rest of the afternoon smelled like cut stems and sunscreen and lemonade that had too many lemons. We sketched out the next 8 weeks on the butcher paper. Soil basics, irrigation, grant writing for teens, small engine repair, a potluck where every dish had to include something we grew. Clara added Conflict 101, saying no without saying sorry. The kids groaned and then smiled because they knew. Before everyone left, we planted a tree near the old swing, a Honeycrisp apple. The roots looked like a handful of careful nerves. We set it in the hole and backfilled with compost that steamed a little, warm as bread. I poured the first bucket of water, then the second. Each kid took a turn. Each hand made the future heavier and steadier. I pressed the soil firm around the trunk and tied a soft strip of fabric to the stake. A stake for the tree and for me. We name things. We help them stand till they can stand alone. Evening arrived with a cool hand. The crowd trickled to cars, to bikes, to whatever version of home they'd return to. They promised to come back Saturday, then Sunday, then forever. A boy asked if he could check on Miguel after school. "I insist," I said. He ran like a flag. When the last tail light became a star, I walked the rows. I did the small things, the things that add up. Turned off the hose, coiled it neatly, pinched a bud here, pulled a weed there. I tucked the apple tree in one more time, just because. The center, our center, looked both new and old, like a face that has learned how to smile again. I sat on the porch with Daisy at my feet and my aunt's letter in my lap. The sky went lavender, then ink. The crickets took their shift. I said her last line out loud, the way you say a spell to remember it. Family is chosen. I let the words land, on the railing, on the field, on me. I imagined them seeping into the soil like good rain. I imagined them finding the seeds we'd just planted and wrapping them in something unnamed and necessary. If you've been here this whole story, through the ghosts, the papers, the courtroom, the porch, the worm named Miguel, thank you for staying. I don't take your time lightly. One more thing, before we turn off the porch light. If you're standing at a gate you built and people keep calling it a wall, remember the garden on the other side. Remember you. Remember that no can be the most generous gift you give your future. Would you come by our little corner of earth if you could? Would you plant something with us, basil, a boundary, both? Tell me below. Tell me what you'd name your worm. Tell me the first thing you'll say yes to after you say no. I'll be here in the morning with coffee and a shovel and a sign that reads, Roots of Tomorrow. If you listen close, you might hear the land answer back.